10.
Okay, now there's 10, and we're going live here on Facebook. Okay.
You're on in 2 and 1.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, or evening, my friends, depending where you are. I'm Emily Windsor Craig, and this is History Reset. Where I am, it's 1 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time on June the 20th, 2020. History Reset is a look back at the history we didn't get, and it's brought to you each Saturday to bring valuable information to the public that corporate media refuse to divulge. This program is a public service, but please donate to People's Internet Radio in Dublin, Ireland, to keep the people's truth coming at you without commercial adverts. Today's topic in History Reset is feeling victimized or empowering ourselves will change everything. And that is where I'm going to get started. Today I have my producer, Stephen Roberts, with me, and we're going to kick this around together. And maybe the other Steve, is it O'Farrell, is it?
McKenna.
Steve McKenna, who follows on this episode with his own very amusing and informative little program on word definitions and quizzes and stuff. His program is really fun. And today, because of the problem that I have when my throat constricts and I start coughing, I brought all my remedies with me, okay? I have some cold light beer. I have some valerian root if I get the sniffles. I even brought some garlic for those people who don't understand the wonderful characteristics of garlic, how it cleans out the mucus in your system. So if I start coughing, I've got plenty of help at hand. And so let's think about victimization. Steve, do you want to give your story first? Do you want me to go first?
Well, what do you want to know as far as victimization?
Well, how have you ever been led to feel as if you were being picked on?
Oh, well, that's easy.
Yeah.
Quite easy.
Quite easy.
There came a time, I think probably right around puberty, where it was in my first year of high school is when bullying really started prevalently.
Bullying. See, I never had that problem.
No.
I was 5'9" when I was 11 years old, and nobody on the playground was going to mess with me.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
Well, unfortunately, I wasn't.
Okay, yeah. And I was always kind of the silent type. Bullying, the only bullying that I experienced was from my foster mother, who dictated. And that didn't end until her death in 1997.
Right.
Okay, and some of us have parents who did things differently from other parents, and in my foster family, I was directed. Okay, they didn't know what grade I was in, they didn't know what subjects I was studying, they didn't know what my interests were. They had a business, and I was directed to help them in the business, and that was that. Okay, so but tell me more about being bullied. That never happened to me.
Well, I wasn't quite the 5'10" that I am now. In high school, I actually grew up probably 1.5 inches after I graduated. So even my senior year, I wasn't the tallest or the biggest in stature, whatever you want to say. Wasn't physically dominating. I found out, let's see, what was it? Probably close to 10 years ago, 12 years ago maybe. Yeah, she's been gone out of the area since 2008, 2009.
Mm-hmm.
A young woman at church. I happened to be telling her about bullying and me being picked on. And she just popped up and said, "Oh, that's because you're good looking." And it struck me. I I hadn't really thought about anything like that. And then when I look back on it, a lot of the girls did talk to me and want to talk to me, and in the hallways at school or in class or whatever. And whenever that would happen, some boy would hit me in the back of the head, or hit me somewhere, in the back, in the stomach. And it never really occurred to me for 40 plus years
why that was happening.
Yeah. I do know, I had heard for many, many, many years that girls had that kind of a problem. Very attractive girls would get picked on a lot. But it never occurred to me about the boys.
Well, I guess I wasn't very attractive in high school. I was really I was a mouse, I was tall and gangly and studious. I was one of the nerds, and I hung out with nerds, and we nerds pretty much stayed to ourselves, and the nerds have all passed on. They're not even still alive. But that bullying thing reminds me of my dad's experience, because his father grew to maturity in the British Navy and knew how to inflict pain without causing any scars or marks. And
Right.
He was a bully. So by the time my father was 16 years of age, he was 5'1" and weighed about 100 pounds. Oh my God, he was a little gangly thread of a kid. He didn't thrive. He wouldn't eat for his nurses. That was his way of getting even with the nurses that he had taking care of him. All right, so when he was 20, he was all the way up to 5'4" and maybe 105 pounds.
Oh boy.
And that's when he enlisted in the troop guards and went off to war in World War I at 5'4" and 105 pounds. Now, you don't have to be crazy to do that, but it helps. Okay, all right.
I'm not sure about the British, but in the American military, he would have been right on the verge of not being able to be accepted.
Exactly so. And in the 3.5 years that he was in the European theater, he was in France, in Italy, and in North Africa. He grew 4 more inches. And he blossomed in the military, whereas he couldn't blossom at home. So
he had good food.
it was pretty good. And he had a wonderful time. He loved the military for the rest of his life. But he was bullied at home. The bullying was so bad, his younger brother, Albert, who became George VI, had a stutter and a stammer for the rest of his life that he had a hard time getting over.
Well, that was my problem too. I had a stuttering problem very badly up until probably the age of 19.
Yeah, and I was tongue-tied too. And that's because we're not popular and we don't have all the confidence that we might have. So,
well, I was always looking over my shoulder. I was always looking off the peripheral vision for some fit to come flying in.
Oh.
My nerves, I think.
Okay, and I was just so shy. I was a wallflower, and didn't do anything but study and then comply with my parents' demands. But the victimization is an attitude that we take and carry with us. There's a saying that my sometimes son Paul taught me about some years ago: no matter where you go, there you are. And so I took the victimization from being in a foster family, unappreciated or unliked or whatever. I took that into my marriage. And so I was victimized there too, because I was afraid to speak up. I was afraid to stand up for myself. I was, just wholly subservient. And my rather intelligent husband thought that was not fun to have to deal with. So after 6.5 years of marriage, he dumped me for somebody else who was less timid.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And then I had the fun of being a single parent, bringing up 2 lively kids in poverty. So the victimization script continued. So how do we get past that? We don't until we kind of hit a form of bottom. We hit the place where we have to acknowledge that this isn't working and we want to do something else and something other. And that's when I swallowed religiosity, hook, line, and sinker. That was my refuge from victimization, was religiosity. Where did you find comfort?
I haven't.
Oh, you haven't? You
No.
haven't? Oh, well, then let's think about what we can do to help us realize that we're here for a reason and that everything is happening for a reason, and that history reset is about the accounts that we have in our history, that there have been massive changes that actually did stuff to history. Okay, there was the flood of Noah's day that took out the giants. There was Sodom and Gomorrah being leveled by huge burning balls of sulfur. And you know, those balls of sulfur are still all over the world. There's a bunch of them in Antarctica. There's a bunch of them in Kosovo and in Russia today. I have pictures of them. I take pictures of everything. You know me, I'm a picture fanatic. Okay. And every empire that has arisen out of the ashes of the previous empire, and I'm talking about Sumer, Babylon, Assyria, Greece, Rome, Tartary, and now, has come to the point where it is defined by its mercenary ethic, and it's taken down again. So that's where we are now. It looks to me as if we're due for the ethic of commercialism, corporate domination over law, industrial domination over the environment, human resource management industry domination over the lives of people who work, education domination over the ethic and philosophy of well-meaning people, church and spiritual domination over the process of progressing the spirit through the physical experience, scientific domination over how things work and what is true. We're back to an empire that's irrational and unreasonable. Would you agree?
All empires, all governments are irrational and what's the other word you just said?
Unreasonable.
Unreasonable, yes.
Do you think that 250 years ago, when the United States of America crafted its Constitution, do you think that was an unreasonable system?
No, because it wasn't it was never meant to be a democracy. It was meant to be a republic.
Right. Yeah. And as a republic, it depended on literacy. It depended on all the citizenry being up to date on what was going on. And so the press had to be free. It depended on people.
Back 200 years ago, almost everybody spoke 2 and 3 languages.
Yes, and King James version of English, Shakespearean version of English vocabulary was widespread. And one of the nice parts of the King James Bible is that it has such a rich vocabulary that has never been duplicated. Never been duplicated. The vocabulary of our youngest generation being learned in the Commie Core curriculum has everything to do with abstract.
The Commie Core?
Commie Core, yeah.
First time I've heard that one.
Okay. Well, but that isn't that what it is? It teaches,
basically, yeah.
Yeah, the family is irrelevant, and
well, that's activism.
Yeah, that's right. It's had Marxism embedded in it from day one, and of course it's not the Clinton, it's the Bill Gates Foundation that paid to have it developed. Is this a surprise?
Well, you know, the billionaires of all the times are the ones that have to fund these things. They have to. I think it was both Rockefeller and Rhodes that funded the education system that you grew up on.
Yes,
and I don't know.
The Horace Mann system of categorizing and specializing every discipline so that math and science are separated, even though they're inextricably linked, so that history and law are separated, even those are linked, so that hygiene and athletics are separated, even those are physically linked. Yes, the specialization of knowledge and putting knowledge in these little cubicles so that people don't see the connections. That came home to me at George Mason University, around 1986, 87. I was an undergraduate in those days, and I took a philosophy course, and I got all excited about phenomenology. Okay, phenomenology is when you pull everything out of the closet and you spread it on the floor, and you put everything that's alike together and different separated, and you organize, and like that. That's what phenomenology is. I thought that was cool. So I did a paper on the phenomenology of a person's diet. I got an A in the paper. I'm so sorry I didn't keep it. Okay. They'd never seen anything like that before because my major was nutrition in those days. So then I went on to graduate school, and I had to take computer science. And in computer science, I had to study parallel process and neural networks. And guess what? That's phenomenology. That's sorting everything that's the same together and everything that's different in different piles and figuring out how things relate to each other. That's the same thing as phenomenology in philosophy. So I said to my professor, did you know that neural nets are the same thing as phenomenology? And he looked at me as if I'd done something terrible. Okay. All right. So then in graduate school, because I was in conflict analysis and resolution, we were talking about public policy.
None of them like to be challenged for anything, do they?
Oh, no. So in public policy, I studied under Professor Dr. John N. Warfield, Professor Emeritus, University of Virginia. And he taught me, and I worked in his method called interactive management of separating experiences and outcomes into piles and putting the good ones here and the bad ones there and figuring out how things go together. And I said to Dr. Warfield, well, this is the same thing as parallel processing and neural nets. It's the same thing as phenomenology. How come you guys aren't talking to each other? And he looked at me like I was crazy. All right, same method, 3 different departments. They have completely different vocabularies. They have completely different sets of criteria, but they have sets of criteria, okay? And that's when I learned that academia, because of the way it is funded, because of how it's funded by research contracts, it has to operate on the popularity principle of what the majority likes. It's the majority of the 51%. Which we're back to democracy doesn't work. because it's always the majority of the 51% get to shove the 49% into the gutter, you know?
Or eat them in
Or-
case of the two wolves. And one
Exactly.
sheep eat
Two wolves and one
49
sheep.
much for dinner.
Yeah, all right. And so that's when I found out that academia is particularly vulnerable to propaganda. When I found out that the nursing department, because see, I was in nutrition, and the nursing department was totally bound by rules. If you see this, you have to do A, B, and C. And if you see that, you have to do D, E, and F. And if you see something else, you have to do G, H, and I. It's also rule-based, that there's no thinking aloud. And this is why nurses give vaccine shots without any regard to what might happen to the person they're giving them to. This is why the COVID-19 was treated with respirators, even though the respirators were killing the patients, because what the patients needed was oxygen. Okay? This is why mammograms and what do you call them? The routine tests are given over and over and over and over and over without regard to whether a person actually needs them or not. Okay, this is non-thinking.
Yeah.
Gone to the level of profiteering. And so that's when I realized that academia had lost their sense of truth. And that's what History Reset is about, is we need to recapture our sense of what is actually true compared to what's the usual dogma about it. Okay? There's usually an official story. Okay? There's all kinds of official stories we've been asked to swallow. And for me, my primary case, of course, is that the story about my father abdicating, he never abdicated in the first place. The whole story was bullshit back in 1936, and it's never been corrected. So then we get to, well, how are we victimized by not being able to know the difference between truth and dogma, or between truth and opinion?
How?
Yes, how does that victimize us?
Well, knowledge is power.
Yeah. And
Clearly,
yeah.
Clearly, the winners have always written history, and the winners get to make the rules.
Yeah. And so for the losers who actually want to know what's true,
The peoples of every country are the losers. Let's put it that way.
yeah. Well, what happens to me individually, because I'm not allowed to know what's actually true, it became very difficult to plan my own health and well-being in the presence of the dogma of the dietitians who taught the 4 food groups. It became very difficult for me to balance my checkbook because my economics professor was talking about guns and butter. It became, yeah.
He was about what? Guns and butter.
Yeah, it's the guns and butter argument about economics. How much gets devoted to defense and how much gets devoted to infrastructure. Okay.
Okay. Well, I have a 79-year-old stepdad. He said in his like 11th or 12th grade, one or the other, his economics teacher told him that the American government, or the economy, whatever you want to call it, had to have a war every 10 years to sustain himself. That was back in 1959. He was told that.
Well, and that was based on the current military philosophy and information of the times. Because remember, President Eisenhower signed the Greada Treaty with the Anunnaki, Tall Whites, and Grays. And in that treaty, a mercenary commercial government was signing treaties that were mercenary and commercial. There is no human rights mentioned in the Greada Treaty, in the Townine Treaty, or in the TPP Treaty. Commercial treaties don't touch on human rights as if they do not exist. And on that basis, our law system.
Well, if people want to look at that technically, if we are accepting their system, we don't exist because we are accepting the fictional entities, the fictional characters.
Right. We're consumable products that showed up at the birth with the doc, and our mothers signed the birth certificate that signed us over to the birth certificate scam, which is still going on.
Yes, it is.
I'm wondering if the NESARA, do you know anything about that? NESARA stuff?
No, I've never even heard of that.
Okay, that is an alliance of certain countries who've decided that they are going to overhaul the ethical and commercial system of this world. And they're going to do it by holding a jubilee in which all debts are forgiven, in creating a currency based on the gold standard, and in redistributing resources.
I kind of like the no currency whatsoever type of society. Did you ever watch the Star Trek movies or the Star Trek TV shows?
Sure. But there has to be a way of measuring resources and measuring services, don't you think?
Well, let me get to my point.
Okay.
That was the original series. They came out with some of the movies afterwards, after the series was over.
Yeah.
For many, many years. I don't remember which movie they came out with, but it was like either the second one or something like that, or the third one. They had to come back to Earth in a certain time period.
1920s.
1980s.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it was the one to save the whale. I don't remember what the entire story was. It's been 30 plus years since I've seen it, but they had to come back to Earth in the 1980s, and they quickly found out that they had to have money.
Yeah.
They didn't have a use for money. They didn't have money. They didn't have a use for a monetary system in the 25th century, whatever it was. And they quickly had to invent ways to get money.
Yeah. Okay. Exchange systems.
Exchange systems.
Now we have more than just paper money. We have coins. We have private currencies like the Bradford pound. We have barter systems, which were very active in the 80s and which all went by the wayside. We have pawn shops where you can trade goods in exchange for money that you can exchange for something else that I can't go to Sears and give them a watch and get a washing machine, but I can go to the pawn shop and get $50 to put on the wash. You see, you can do it that way.
Right.
We have thrift shops and consignment shops where goods are recirculated at value.
Yes.
We have charities where extra resources are dumped so that people who are in need can access them for no money.
Yes. And the other example I was going to bring up was the second Star Trek. Was called the Star Trek Next Generation.
Yeah, I remember them. Yeah. I was a Trekkie.
Jean-Luc Picard and Mr. Worf and Geordi LaForge, all that crew, yes.
Data.
Data, Mr. Data.
Yeah.
They had to come back to Earth in the same fashion, the same manner. They had to come back in the 1990s era, and they quickly they quickly found out that they had to have a monetary system. They had to have a monetary exchange also.
Yeah.
I remember one of the characters was probably Captain Picard said that he was quite dumbfounded because in their particular time they didn't have a monetary system. They just gave freely.
Yeah.
Each other.
When in order to have that kind of system, you have to have a level of trust, right?
Also,
in order for goods to be exchanged and exchanged and exchanged and exchanged without harking to value, you have to just trust everybody.
Well, as I'm saying, there wouldn't be a value.
Yeah. But where there's no trust, you're going to put a value on it. We have a problem with that. We have an economic system that's based on distrust.
Well, it's based on greed.
Which is distrust, right? This is why some people hoard. Have you ever lived next to near a neighbor that was hoarders?
Within a half of a mile, yes.
Within
a few blocks, yeah, there's been a few.
In Middletown, the town that died in the Valley Fire, I was staying in a little house, and I walked my dog around the neighborhood, and there were two houses where the residents of those houses stacked their belongings all over their yard, all over the porch, all over the driveway, all over the whole thing. It was just stacked. It was stuff.
Kept everything that they ever had.
Everything that they ever had, right. And in this neighborhood, there was a rental house that was like that. And when the people finally moved out, they didn't take anything with them. They left it all. And the landlord had to bring in truckers to truck this stuff off and literally tear the house apart and put it back together.
Yeah.
Hoarding is the primary characteristic of mistrust. I can't trust that I'm going to have enough tomorrow. So I have to pile it on now. That's why we have paper money, because of the lack of trust that doing a day's work provides a day's living wage. And it doesn't. It doesn't. What the tech companies are doing now is, because we're shut down and so many employees are working from home, they're becoming part-time employees, so their hourly wage goes down. They no longer have a living wage, so they have to accept a part-time job, or they have to accept going on the dole, they have to accept going on welfare. And this is the game that big tech companies are playing in order to keep their expenses down and keep their prices down and yaketa smacketa. This is the game we play over our heads. And so this is part of the real true victimization of our people by the commercial mercenary sectors that are based in maritime admiralty statute codes, who have no respect for what a living wage consists of, who has no respect for the time of their employees. You see, it all goes back to lack of trust because behavior is not predictable. And that's why in the holy law system that Yahweh gave to the Hebrews, if you want a good outcome, do a good deed. And if you want to avoid a bad outcome, refrain from doing what's harmful. And if you screw up, figure out how to fix it. That's what the holy law was based on, is having society get a good outcome. Okay, but that's not what liberalism teaches. Liberalism teaches the Frankfurt School, the protocols. Saul Alinsky teaches the methods of ripping stuff away from those who have worked for it and giving it to the people who...
Because it's for the good feeling. It's to make you feel vindicated.
Yeah,
Right?
right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And so the methods of the left are uniformly destructive, disruptive, coercive, and tyrannical. If you look at their method, where I keep putting up the graphics of the Frankfurt School and the protocols and Saul Alinsky and so on, just to show people, look, this is what the left teaches our children, to tear down what used to work, and now maybe it's only working halfway. Well, let's fix it instead of just throwing out the baby with the bathwater. But that's the game that the tech billionaires are playing against the people and helping us to feel victimized.
Right.
So how do we get away? How do we get out from under it?
How do you get out of it?
How do you get out of it? Right. Well, one way is we have voted in Mr. Trump. Maybe.
Yeah.
Okay. He's trying his way, and his way, the right way, God only knows. But I can thank God he's not Hillary, because that would have been.
Well, you're running on the assumption that any of these puppets are actually in control, though, Emily.
Yeah. Well, they have some control. They have some things they can do, but their area of freedom is always much less than we hope or wish, and they always disappoint us. They always disappoint.
Because they are all liars, and they will always lie. That's why.
They say what's expedient. They say they give everything the most plausible, positive shine to it.
Yes, that's called rhetoric.
Yeah, that's called rhetoric. And that's why we have to learn to see the truth under the shine.
Well, I have 11 years ago.
Yeah. Well, when did I take the red pill? I think I took the red pill at university when I saw the difference.
I did too.
Yeah, at university, I saw that the methods that worked are being sabotaged by the people who say they want reform.
Right.
Okay.
Well, I don't know if I ever told you, but Alex Jones gave me the red pill.
Yeah. Well, he's a centrist. He's not a conservative. He sees the liberal point of view. And the reason that he's not allowed to express his point of view is if he had his way, he would be bringing the left and the right together into a consensus about what is true now.
Do you listen to him? Have you listened?
Not
he is
lately.
All right wing all the time.
I know he rants, and I love him dearly, because he has an audience that is just red pilling.
No, they're not red pilling. They have all of his audience, most of his audience. That's why I can't listen to him anymore, because I am red pilling.
I gave him up.
His audience is nothing but right wing. They gun owners, conservatives, right wingers.
Oh, so he is polarizing.
Yeah, he has from day one.
Okay.
Now, see, what actually turned me on to him was his movie called The Obama Deception.
Yeah.
The actual commercials that he probably still plays on his radio shows to this day. He says the Obama Deception, the definitive movie that is busted or burst, however you say, blows away the right-left paradigm. And then in the next breath, he has Republican candidates on his show, virtually within 30 seconds of a commercial.
Yeah, but the Republicans are split into factions, and the neocon Republicans, called rhinos, Republicans in name only, stand with the progressives of the Democratic Party, and they stonewall every kind of reform that Trump has. The rhinos are dedicated, like John Bolton, dedicated to economy by war. That's their whole shtick.
Yes, and that's his game.
Yeah, yeah. Now there's Prager, the PragerU. What's the guy's name? He's Jewish.
Dennis Prager?
Dennis Prager, okay. He is very middle of the road centrist, and that's why Facebook and is getting rid of him, because he makes a concerted effort to unify and harmonize the right and the left in their genuine impulses. So they can't allow Dennis Prager, because for the media, the way they make their money is on the sensational arguments, divide and conquer, to and against, for and against, for and against. That's how they make their money. So
Sure.
They don't want anybody like Dennis Prager to show up.
No, they want the right left. That's all they want.
Right left. And that's the reason I too have been shadow banned. I never get more than 100 views on my YouTube videos, because I'm so shadow banned. I've been deplatformed 3 or 4 times. It's just a form of annoyance for them, so they can get me to start a new account and start over from zero. At one time, I had 3,000 subs. I was even monetized, but they deplatformed me, returned me to 0, and now I'm all the way back up to 500.
Yeah.
Because they don't want the middle of the road centrist position that seeks to achieve a consensus about the problems that the left sees, and the methods, the productive, positive methods that the right already has and wants to restore to operability, to functionality, to put those problems of the left with those methods of the right and actually harmonize things. That can't be allowed. And that's why the centrists get the worst treatment of all, because we're trying to achieve a consensus around actually solving a problem.
Yeah.
Actually resolving a conflict. And so I see the mainstream media and social media as not merely making it impossible to know what is true, but as standing in the way deliberately by whom they shadow ban and by whom they ban and by whom they harass with stalkers and so on, keeping the left and the right from ever meeting on the same platform to work out some form of consensus. And in doing that, they are election rigging. That is a form of sedition. And I believe that the mainstream media and social media ought to be nationalized and broken up as insofar as who owns them, but then run as a utility according to absolute rules of non-intervention in freedom of speech, except for porn. The porn industry has destroyed the lives of middle-aged and older people. The men that are available to me as dating candidates are all doing porn, and they don't need a woman in their life.
Well, so is the gambling.
Yeah.
So is the drugs, all brought in by the same collectivist system.
And yes, and they use the drugs and guns and porn to make money, to drive their sedition and to drive their disruptions and to drive their distractions. So we're in a time when feeling victimized is truly appropriate from the social point of view, because we are being gamed to death with these vaccines and allopathic treatments. And we're being fooled to death, and we're being misled to death. So how do we climb out of that hole? And it takes a lot of careful attention, I have found. You know, I've been retired for some time now. And you sort of have to take it the way you clean out the closet, with a sense of, I've got to get this whole thing, this whole game organized. And very close to home, my health has to depend on the food that doesn't poison me, the air that doesn't poison me, the water that doesn't poison me, and getting sufficient movement and exercise. And so you start with yourself and you start fixing yourself.
Yes.
And fixing your focus and your ability to spread out your consciousness and then to spiral it back into focus and spread it out. Okay. Go ahead.
Well, I just wanted to add something. It's kind of pertinent,
Yeah.
I think, maybe. Ben Byrne, the guy that helped start this station,
Yeah.
a few years ago when he was on air, I heard him say there's 4.5 million Irish people. And I think he said at the time there was like over 12,000 police for the entire country. And he said, instead of trying to convince 4.5 million people, why don't we try to change the minds or try to teach police what they're doing is wrong?
Yeah, they need to be challenged and qualified to levels of behavior that are more subtle than they've been taught.
Not just that, but the policing industry was invented to protect them from us. I don't know if you knew that or not.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah, you can look it up even on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Policing was invented for crowd control.
Yeah.
What used to happen in history was if a politician went against their word or was caught in a lie, the people would march down to their office and drag them out and tar and feather them,
or hang them,
or beat them within an inch of their life. Yeah. And the criminals, I don't call them government anymore. I call them criminals.
Yeah.
They finally had to get wise, and they had to invent a protection system.
Well, and we're more rational in our conflict analysis and resolution discipline now, particularly since the Iron Mountain Conference of 1963 to 67, which has established a set of mercenary ethics for military and police. There's no such thing as right or wrong, good and bad anymore. It's all what's expedient in the minds of the professionals. Now, my master's is in conflict analysis and resolution. And since I got my master's, which is 27 years ago, I have repeatedly attempted to talk to officials in law enforcement and sociology about the theory of law enforcement and how problems are seen by law enforcement, and they will not discuss it. They will not discuss it. And so I agree with you that the law enforcement function needs to be grabbed by the lapels and dragged into a new learning environment where they learn how to resolve conflicts and disputes, how to be civil with uncivil people. They need crowd control that doesn't make the matters worse. And right now, I believe they're being taught military crowd control, which does make things worse, which is what the tech giants want, is for things to get worse. They want a civil war so that the new world order can grab hold and demand that everybody be subservient to a single set of rules and laws, which doesn't work. You can't give the same laws to birds and fish. You can't give the same laws to peoples from different cultures. They're not going to fit. So I agree with you completely, Ann. One of our biggest and most critical problems is that law enforcement is not socialized to solve problems. Now, it's one of the aspects of the president's recent attempt to fix the police departments. I think they've added more problem resolution and added more intervention by non-aggressive agencies and so on. But there's still a lot more work to do, because one of the things that I'm finding out from my son, who's in the military, is that our military is very stagnant. You get stuck in a pencil pushing job, and there's nowhere else to go. All right. Whereas if the military had career paths in civil crowd control, martial arts, and there was one other thing that they could get into, make more of a career out of solving and resolving problems and disputes.
You know what,
yeah.
you know what the number one, well, it's called an MOS. What the number one job, it's been a few years ago when Obama was president, or puppet, the number one job people sought was to learn how to, well, you know, it's basically playing a video game. The drone drivers.
Yeah.
The drone people.
Surveillance is a big industry.
Well, they wanted to be able to push that button,
Yeah.
kill a bad guy.
Yeah.
Just like do
Just like the
they
game.
do
Yeah.
video games.
Like the kids, they want to be able to manipulate their thumbs and affect somebody's life. And
Yeah,
that's
there's a virtually no mistake why the video games were invented that way in the mid to late 80s. They started coming out with that, and today that's what the children that bought them video games are doing.
Yeah.
They're running the drones and killing the bad guys, or
Yeah.
the so-called bad guys.
yeah. And as if getting rid of people is the same thing as getting rid of a problem. And one thing I learned from my philosophy studies from King Nanar, destruction is never a blessing. Life itself is never the problem. All
Well,
right.
you know, it's desensitizing.
Yeah. Like
they,
porn. It's like porn. It's desensitizing.
It's also no mistake. You know, the demonizations with the Muslims started back in the as soon as the movie industry came out. They started demonizing the Muslims for that particular reason, just
Well,
for the
Muslims
decent-
have another problem. The Quran teaches taqiyya, which is double dealing, jizya, which is protection tax, racketeering, and jihad, which is divide and conquer. So in the Quran, there are at least three behaviors which are verboten and not allowed in the holy law of the Hebrews. All right.
Well, people don't actually know it, but the Islam was created by the Catholic Church.
Yeah, by the Jesuits. You know what for? You know why?
They're boogeyman.
No, not just that. No, it was creating martyrs and saints so they could have more festivals and make more money.
Yeah, sure, okay.
Yeah, it was all about money.
Yeah.
There was a time in the Middle Ages and Dark Ages when the Templars were taken down that the church had no way to make money because of the Black Death and several movements. And so the Islamic movement served to create an enemy so that would drum up some business.
Uh-huh.
And nothing has changed. Nothing has changed.
Same.
Well, I don't know how far we've gotten from victimization, Steve, because we've succeeded in pointing out that victimization is real and it's civil and it's happening to us right now. But the way that I have worked out of it and grown up out of it is I see its cosmic implications, and I see in the history resets that this system we have is going to be taken down at the cosmic level. It's not just going to be a
Well, that would be nice, because we don't actually need physical revolts. I mean, I take that back. We do need physical revolts to gain freedom, but I really don't want to see it.
Yeah, I don't want to see people doing
hundreds
it.
That may as well die.
Yeah, I don't want to see people doing it, but I do see, because of our history of resets, you know, there was a reset in the 1600s, there was one in the 1700s, there was the mud flood, the huge mud flood from 1812 to 1840, and then there was World War I in the 1900s, and we're in a time of reset, and I think that's how it's going to happen, by natural disasters. So
Yeah.
we don't have to always be victimized. At some point, we're going to get loose from it.
Yeah, that would be nice.
Well, I hope so. We haven't heard from our other Steve. Where did he go?
He is getting busy. He's getting his stuff ready. He probably hasn't been home very long, and he wants to do things.
Okay, well, good. I think we've had a good time, though, and we've
Yes.
talked about some important things. And,
Yes, we have.
We're being victimized, but we don't have to feel that way. We can give ourselves the privilege of seeing a way out, a light at the end of the tunnel. And if you can do that, you can be positive even under these circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I hope for.
Okay. So it was a nice talk.
Yes, it was, Steve. Thank you so much for your contribution on it. You make it so much easier and more pleasant for me to do this on Saturday.
Yeah.
Okay, now you're not going to be here next week.
No, I'm not.
Okay, well, have the other Steve get in touch with me and we'll talk about it.
Well, hopefully he's listening, and you can send him a message also. Or
yeah, I will. It's been a good Saturday.
Well, okay. We'll go ahead and end this.
Okay, see you next time. Bye-bye.
All right.
There we go.